like to welcome each and every individual to Podcast for Voices of Integrity for Young Men. And today we're going to be going through the driver personality. And so if you haven't been through the other ones, for sure you'll want to do that. Which of the four shapes did you choose? If you chose the pyramid or out of control, which are the four things that cause you most frustration, you would be the driver personality. So one of your greatest strengths might be your drive, assertiveness. You make things happen. One of your weaknesses might be your drive, assertiveness. You make things happen. Our greatest strength is our greatest weakness. Our greatest weakness is just our greatest strength misapplied. It's taking a strength and carrying it too far. If you're a driver personality, you probably love that I'm talking so quickly because you're like, let's get this thing done. If you're an amiable, you're like, I don't trust the guy. He's talking way too quick. And whoever is talking quick can't be trusted. If you're an analytic, you're like, I can't trust the guy because anybody that's talking that quick can't be thinking through things. If you're an expressive, you probably like me if I would laugh and have some humor. So if you're a driver analytic, you're like me. Officially, okay, I'm a little wound up today. Just give you heads up, little warning, but I can be because I'm a driver analytic. And so the driver, and you guys can interrupt at any time, if you're listening, to the rebroadcast of this podcast, well, join, um, join the live. It's a lot
Do
more
you
fun.
do you think you're wound up because it's Friday today?
Because of the date night with my wife, is that what you're asking?
Maybe.
Yeah. So every Friday for years, decades, we've had date nights. Even when Jonathan, he and I went over to Africa. So he was probably 13, I think. So that would have been 20 years ago. He and I went over to Africa and we had a date night. My wife and I, for 3 weeks, we were over there. And so my wife and I had a date night when, I was in Africa. So she and I rented the same movie and we watched it together. I mean, not the whole thing because that was very expensive to call, but we called it the beginning of the movie. Then we called each other halfway through the movie. And then we called it the end of the movie. So, guys, I'm just telling you, like women dig this stuff. They just do. I mean, when women hear that story, they're like, you got to be kidding. That's the most romantic thing in the world. It really wasn't that big of a deal, but it was to my wife. Like she absolutely loves our date nights, and so yes, I might be because it's Friday. I might be a bit wound up because of date night. We are going to have an amazing date night tonight. I don't know. I woke up this morning at 3 o'clock too. Couldn't get back to sleep, and so I'm halfway through the workday. Like not really, but yeah. So there's a lot of that. So if you're a driver analytic officially, there's four major personalities. There's 16 if you look at primary and secondary. If you look at three levels, there's 64. If you look at four levels, there's 256. If you look at the combination between the geo and the pain, there's 65,536 possible combinations. The official for the driver, the official is that there's no better personalities. They all have strengths, they all have weaknesses. But if you're a fellow driver analytic or analytic driver, the unofficial is there is a better personality. It just happens to be ours. Now we're no different than anybody else because everybody thinks their own personality is the best personality. And everybody thinks they think like them, but they don't. The driver analytic is you and I are going to be, we want to do things fast and perfect. Now, if you're an analytic driver, that's very different. That's perfect and fast. And trust me, there's a difference between fast and perfect and fast. But we're really, really good with fast. We're machines. It can be hard to work with us. Why is that? You might be asking. I'm sure you are. It's because we're so humble. Now, when I say that, people, project themselves and their ego onto us and they say, you're not really humble if you're saying that. Well, if it's true, then it's true. It just is. And when I say too humble, what I mean by that is we think we're actually normal. We think everybody can see the big picture and everybody can go ahead and get the task done, but it's hard to work with us. Why? Because we're machines. I mean machines. My wife of 39 years and my kids say, Dad, you never had a childhood. You were never a kid. I don't know what they're talking about. So this type of personality is amazing personality, but you probably won't like me. Why? Because I'm way too direct with you. You know, if you're a driver, amiable personality, that's more likable because one of your greatest strengths is your concern, compassion for people. One of your weaknesses is concern, compassion for people. So because you cross over, you're going to have a lot of inner conflict. You might run somebody over, apologize for running them over, and then run them over again. That may seem harsh, but it's really not as harsh as I am as a driver analytic. I will run you over and I'll explain why you deserve to be run over. I'm just saying, like, I love people. I really do tremendously. You ask my wife, who's an amiable, analytic personality, who loves people more, you or your husband? Everybody thinks she's a nice person. And I'm not saying she's not. I'm just saying that the amiable, she'll say without questions that Mark loves people a lot more than I do. I love people. I just don't like them. I don't like people. They drive me insane. Anyways, if you're a driver expressive like my good friend Tom Kumpis, I'm very jealous of this personality because this personality will run somebody over and they do it in such a fun, cool, nice, exciting way. Not nice, just fun and cool that the person say, please, please run me over. Tom can be harsher on people than I can, and he gets away with it. I don't get away with it. People just don't like me. And what's sad about that, maybe, is not that people don't like me. It's like, I don't really care. There's 8 billion people on the planet. My wife loves me. My 7 kids love me. My grandkids love me. There's a few other people. It's not the end of the world if somebody doesn't like me. So it's a really interesting personality. In the pre-show, which you only get the pre-show if you go ahead and participate live. So I'd encourage you to participate live. Kenny asked the question in the pre-show, how do you have deep relationships? And so my Uncle Gary, he said once to me, and he's more like an amiable personality. He said once to me, he said, Mark, you're very, very unusual. I just kind of said, okay, why? And he said, because you have the capacity to have many deep relationships. Most people have a struggle with having, just one relationship, like one deep. You have tons of deep relationships. I can't wait to get Paul Weiner on. He and I have been friends for I don't know, 25, 30 years, maybe 35 years, long time. And, I tick him off so much that once he didn't talk to me for 5 years. I think it's been about a year that he hasn't talked to me because he was pretty ticked. But I got an email from him yesterday, which I was very happy to see that. So my wife, you'd think like everybody likes her, but maybe the only deep relationship she has is with me. And so my youngest brother, Ken, it'd be interesting to get him on too. He's going through a season in life that's pretty wild. And so he would have some things that would be very interesting to share. Anyways, he went ahead and asked my 2 other brothers and I don't know, probably 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. He was out. Every Sunday we'd get together for a couple hours over the phone and talk, the 4 of us. And he said, I'm curious. I've been wondering what it takes to create deep relationships. And I had thought about it for, like, I like deep relationships. I don't know if this is true with every driver. I don't know, but it is with me. I love deep relationships. Superficial, surface, shallow, really. You know what? I can get those. Those are a dime a dozen. I can go ahead and do that minutes over the phone. Actually, I can go deep in minutes over the phone. Anyways, so he asked, and I paused. I didn't want to share first, and I waited. And my brother Vern, who's a CPA, poor guy, he had no ideas. And my brother Dan, and maybe next time you guys can ask for Dan's email address. So Dan, I don't know, there's something, he's in technology, super smart guy, has his master's degree, was in the, Marines for 22 years, I think it was, super smart guy in technology too. But he didn't have an idea either, had no idea how to they had nothing. I mean, nothing. And so maybe next time, or maybe somewhere on here, I can give Dan's, email address. And, if you guys want to connect with him, maybe he's got some ideas now. I'm not sure. But anyways, so I told Ken after I waited a while and they didn't have anything, I said, I think it comes through conflict. I think it comes through tension. I think it comes through, pressure. I think it comes through, just it's asking, when we ask deep questions. So my wife, she has said that, in the last 6 months that she wants a deep relationship with me or a deeper relationship with me. I would say that yes, of all the people in the world that I know, and being an international speaker and author, I know a lot of people. Yes, she is the person I have the deepest relationship with, without question. And I don't think it's nearly as deep as what it could be. What's really cool is she's now thinking, hey, I want a deeper relationship. But does she really? So what she's been doing is, we live in Bristol, Indiana. There's a kind of a healing place that we're kind of engineering and building. And so you're invited to Riverside Retreats. Maybe Adam can go ahead and put the Riverside Retreat somewhere in here, and you can take a look at it and come visit us. But we go on a morning walk almost every morning. We walk and talk, and she's been coming up with deep questions. Now, deep questions, like I've learned that when people ask me deep questions, they don't really want the answer. Like when somebody says, how are you doing today? That's not really a deep question, but they really typically do not want to know how you're doing. They just want you to say, you know, good. And then you ask them, how are you doing? They say good. And it's just superficial. Like my uncle Gary saying, man, that guy's impacted me. You guys might hear a lot about him. You can ask about him and some of the insights that he had into me and our marriage and stuff like that over the years. But last time he came visited us in Bristol, yeah, and I said, Uncle Gary, that's just a visit. And so to me, there's always a goal. Like, what's the goal? So I said, Uncle Gary, Aunt Carrie, like, what's the goal of your visit? And my Uncle Gary said, my goal of the visit is to have a superficial, to have you have a superficial relationship or superficial conversation. I thought that was the strangest thing in the world. I'm like, okay, well, I'm thinking, okay, well, that's not that hard. So I said, immediately, I said, okay. So Uncle Gary, pretty cool weather outside, huh? And I just jumped into a superficial surface level conversation. And I tried to keep it going as long as I could. And, I achieved that goal in minutes. Now we have a pond. We're right on the river. We have 4 acres, about 500 feet of riverfront. It's beautiful, great place of healing. And so, if you, Dreamscape Creations, Kenny and Luke's company, construction company, they have done a lot of work on the property, and it is really, creating a dream for my wife and I and kids and families and grandkids and stuff like that. So I'd definitely put a plug in for them. It's very different than any other construction company out there. Anyways, so we have a pond too. And so we have a shallow pond and a deep pond. In the deep pond, it's a little more dangerous, just like in deep relationships. It's a little more dangerous. You can drown. It's 14 feet deep. So you can drown in the deep. In the shallow, probably not going to drown, although some can. But you probably aren't going to drown, but you can't have as much fun in the shallow end, as you get older. And so I think, Kenny, the answer to your question in deep relationships is to ask deep questions. And Adam can connect with my wife and she can go ahead and contribute and maybe put a list of deep questions for, maybe young men and young women too. But when we ask deep questions, like I'm a little nervous. I'm not saying my wife is not a safe person to be around, and definitely not saying my son-in-law Josh Collins is not a safe person to be around. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that when they ask me questions, I get a little bit nervous. Like if they are asking deep questions, I get a little nervous. My therapist, Beth Smith, she says, there's a little bit of trauma there with you, Mark. Why? Because I think, I have social autism. That's another story for another time. But I think when people are asking you questions, they actually want the answer. What I've trying to learn at 59 years old is that often people don't want the honest answer. They don't call it a lie. Like when somebody's not telling the truth, I think it's a lie, but it's not a lie to other people. Like the other three personalities, it's not a lie. It's just not telling the truth. It's being nice. How is being nice? How is being nice? How is lying being nice? It's a process. Like the driver just doesn't understand that. I don't understand that. So I think with each of the different personalities, Kenny, going deep, I think the concept's the same. I think the concept is the same, and that you got to be willing to press. You got to be willing to be pressed. You got to be willing to ask the hard questions. You've got to be willing to take risk. You've got to be willing to work hard. You've got to be willing to sacrifice, and you've got to be willing to take risks. You've got to be humble. You've got to go ahead and well, the first thing, if we look at the feelings, I think get in the way of feelings get in the way big time of deep relationships, because people are entitled, self-righteous, and victims. So it's easy for, my wife and I have been married since she was 19 and I was 20, 39 years. We're coming up on 40 years, thinking about planning on maybe going to Italy for our 40th, which would be really cool. So it's easy for me to get entitled after 39 years to say, well, I've done all of this with my wife. I'm entitled to this. It's easy for her to get entitled. And so, but we have to fight that and be thankful. Thankfulness is a vaccination against entitlement. We have to be humble. I mean, the more I know about my wife, the more I know I don't know. She's complicated, and I love that. I love and then we have to take ownership and not be a victim. And so we have to be careful, because the expressive, understanding personalities, the expressive and the driver will tend to like to go deep. The analytic and the amiable will tend not to. The analytic tends to be the one that's most fearful of deep relationships, because there can be conflict in that relationship. So understanding who we're going deep with is very, very important. And so I could go on. There's so much more that we could cover here. One of the things that would be a good one, another podcast, would be healing at a heart level. So, this group, we've been, doing some experimentation with hurt at a heart level. And so how do you heal at a heart level? That's a great story, because I think every young man's probably been hurt at a heart level, often by a young woman. And if they don't heal at a heart level, they carry that scar of bitterness or, infection with them into future relationships. Does that answer your question, Kenny, or was there more you wanted to go into?
It does, yes. I've heard that. Or somebody was sharing some advice with me, and they told me that conflict also builds deeper relationships, or like if it's good to have conflict in order to go through that and then have a better relationship afterwards.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the challenge is that, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so, so yes, again, the driver and the expressive, the pyramid and the wavy line will tend to go ahead and be more willing to be in conflict than the analytic amiable. The analytic amiable hates the conflict. So Kenny, you're a double expressive and a double amiable. So very unusual personality, especially as a man. And so part of you likes to mix it up. A good fight, and then a part of you hates it. So you'll have conflict and tension. Anything else, Kenny, you have on?
I don't think so.
Okay. Luke, anything you have on this particular podcast topic?
Nope.
for young men. So again, you know, if you're a young man, you know, learning to care for somebody other than yourself will go a long ways with young women. Just saying. She's watching you a lot closer than you realize. How do you treat your mom? How do you treat your dad? Because there's a high probability that's how she's going to be treated. She knows this instinctively. She just does. So share this podcast with other guys that you know. If you're a young woman, it seems to me that it's harder and harder, and I have 4 daughters. It's harder and harder to find a great young man. It just is. And so I'm not sure you're going to find him. I think you're going to have to build him. So young women, what you're looking for is a young man that I think maybe the number one characteristic, I don't know. It's hard. It's like one of the top characteristics is the willingness to think differently, the willingness, the like a childlike, like humility, like I want to learn. And the same thing for guys, for young women. That's one of the characteristics that you're looking for. Does this woman, this young lady, is she willing to learn? For older men, you know, who do you know that you want to pass this along to? For older women, do you have sons or grandsons? Like you have a lot more power than you realize as a woman over men. They may not seem like they listen. They may not seem like they care, but trust me. So I have 3 sons and 3 grandsons, and my wife, man, the young men care a lot about her and what she thinks of them. So if you have any questions on anything we covered, connect with the individual. For sure, join the Life GPS mobile app, because that's when you'll be assigned a mentor for the group, and you can participate and get a lot more out of it if you do that. If you have any questions, connect with the individual who invited you to participate in today's session, or you can call toll free 888-230-2300. Outside the US 630-393-9909. And always remember, we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.